everyone, and welcome to our webcast today. We're going to be talking about some of the most important features of the product called SQL Diagnostic Manager. My name is Mark Slavens. I'm going to be presenting today. Just a little bit of housekeeping. If you have any questions along the way, you can introduce those questions over in the little question panel on the webinar pane on the right-hand side. I will get to those questions at the end of the presentation. Also, just notable to mention, we're going to be recording this presentation, so afterwards, if you want to go back and revisit some of the details of what I covered today, it will be available. And you can always set up an actual one-on-one demonstration of the product that we're going to look at today if you're new to it and you'd like to get a little bit more information about other features that we offer. So I'm going to go ahead and get things rolling here, and of course, again, the name of our webcast today is the 5 important features of SQL Diagnostic Manager. Kind of going into this, I figured that there's going to be different types of audiences that will be on this call today. You're going to have the new user that just installed the product. Maybe they're in the middle of a proof of concept and they want to see some of the key features that maybe they didn't consider as they started the proof of concept. Then you're going to have the veteran user that may be joined just because they have their way of doing things with the product day to day, and they just want to see some of the other areas that maybe they haven't considered. And then you're going to have the other audience that's going to be that individual that has their own scripts or their own native functionality that they rely on, and they want to see how a tool like Diagnostic Manager is going to fit their day-to-day requirements, and specifically some of the key features that are going to be beneficial to them on a day-to-day basis. So I figured we're going to have those types of audiences here today. So you're going to hear me speak to each type of audience as we go through the features. Some of it may be applicable to you and some may be applicable to them. So without further ado, let's get started. I do have just a couple of slides to introduce the presentation today and talk about what we're going to be covering, as well as I have a slide regarding the architecture for anyone who's new to Diagnostic Manager. I'll try to keep that brief and get into the 5 key features. And again, at the end of the presentation, we'll come back around full circle and answer any of the questions you might have. So let's go ahead and switch to the next slide here. And these are the areas that I guess that it could be subjective to anyone who uses Diagnostic Manager, depending on your environment, depending on how you're set up and how your SQL instances are configured, even the applications that you're hosting. Different features and functionality are going to prove more beneficial to one individual versus the other. I tried to stick with the features that I felt covered the umbrella of everyone that was going to be using a tool like this, areas that everyone would go in and look at these 5 areas and find some true benefit with those features. And they include the prescriptive and predictive analytics, which with the prescriptive analysis, this is a feature of the product that's going to analyze an instance and tell you everything that could potentially be wrong with it. It's also going to provide recommendations for how to fix issues, and even in some cases, the actual fix-it script to fix the problem. To me, this is something that I always call it the differentiator, one of the many differentiators of what Diagnostic Manager offers over what you're dealing with your regular native monitoring or perhaps even other monitoring tools that you work with. But it really provides a lot of value. And to that point, with a tool like Diagnostic Manager, it really has evolved over the years. It's been around for, well, I guess over 15 plus years at this point. And so, you know, years ago, and I'm kind of old school myself, I've been doing this a long time, but it used to be all about, you know, making sure that a server is up and available. You know, make sure it's 99.999% available. Then we had the evolution of monitoring, where it took us to the next stage where we needed to know more about how that server was delivering to the business. We know it's up 99.999% of the time, but how about the performance? Give me some key performance indicators to show that we're appropriately delivering these resources and performance around the data delivery process to our end users. The evolution took a step further, especially around 2008 and 2009, where we had kind of the diminishing of human resources around the data environment, where you'd have fewer DBAs managing larger growing data environments. And the question that came from those types of DBAs was, It's nice to know that I'm having a problem, but can you tell me the root cause? Get me to the source of the problem. Is it related to an application, database, user, session, query, certain parameters, things like that? Well, that prescriptive analysis now speaks to the evolution to yet another level, which again I consider to be a differentiator, and that is the delivery of the right answers, fix-it scripts, and information about the problem to teach you about it, so that you really get to the point that you're able to solve the problem, not just get to the root cause, but actually fix the problem. Now, prescriptive analytics, that goes hand in hand with predictive analysis that will tell you the likelihood of other alerts happening later today based on past trends. So we'll talk about that here in just a moment. History browser is a feature of the product that's been around for many years. And it is, again, something that I think stands out as a differentiator of this product versus other tools that are out there, in the sense that it allows you to really take the console and turn it into, for lack of a better description, a time machine, and basically go back, whether it's 30 minutes, whether it's 6 hours, maybe even further, yesterday, a week ago, a month ago, 2 months ago, depending on what your data retention policies are set to. But let's face it, you can't always respond to alerts. This is a proactive monitoring and alerting solution, but if an alert pops up, you might be in a meeting, you might be out to lunch, you might be on vacation, and if that situation arises, you're going to want to have tools that allow you to forensically research problems of the past. And History Browser will allow you to roll back all the moving parts that make up SQL Server performance and replay them from a point in time up to when the fire started, and even what happened after that point in time. So we'll focus on that a little bit today. Temp Db, this one I kind of toss back and forth with the multi-baselining capability that goes along with Diagnostic Manager. Both of them I think are beneficial. I just felt like Temp Db really spoke to everyone's requirements, because I find that most every SQL instance, for the most part, you're going to find that Temp Db is heavily used. Application developers will use Temp Db to store data, manipulate data, process data, and you multiply that times the hosted application databases, and there could definitely be some performance problems that we see evident through Temp Db. So that is something I wanted to emphasize as a benefit of this product as well. Custom counters and dashboards. This is something that kind of speaks to the fun factor of the tool. When you go into any monitoring tool, you expect it is going to monitor CPU, for example, memory, disk activity, things like that, which to me are kind of the boring aspects of a tool. Really, when we're dealing with monitoring tools, we kind of look for some of those cutting edge areas that are giving us a little bit more than just the commoditized features. And custom counters and dashboards really brings that above and beyond what we're already adding in the product, which are cutting edge features around all. And we only have time for the 5 areas today, but there's so many features of this product. But what's great about custom counters and dashboards is that you're allowed to really make this product your own, customize it, add your own queries, add your own perfmon counters, your own WMI counters, Hyper-V counters, VMware counters, and we already have those types of metrics already built in. However, you can build on that and really customize your environment. And to the point of adding custom counters, then you can very easily add those to your own customized dashboards. So you might even have your own custom dashboards focused 100% on just the counters that you decided to add if you wanted to. And then the last part is kind of a multifaceted component, and that is the query analysis. Because through the query analysis, and this actually would probably be one that I prioritize above all of these details, and that is because query analysis is really going to where the rubber meets the road, and that is what users are doing with query activity and what the read and write activity looks like, and duration and CPU time, and what parameters are being passed to cause performance problems. But we have a number of ways to analyze queries, and I consider that again to be a differentiator, because I find other monitoring tools either have no query analysis, or if there are some that are more focused specifically on database type monitoring, you will find that they'll have 1 or 2 ways of analyzing queries, maybe some weight statistics, along with maybe some execution plan. Where we have that too, but we also provide other ways, and that includes signature mode, statement mode, query history, query weights by duration, query weights over time, And then diving into the pro version of Diagnostic Manager, we also have execution plan analysis and full statistical analysis of everything going on the SQL instance. So these are the top 5 areas that I wanted to focus on today. Like I said, they are subjective to opinion, and they are the ones that I selected. But you know what? If there's other areas that you would like to look at, we can always set up a one-on-one demonstration of the product and really get into the nitty-gritty details of everything that the product is capable of offering. So the next slide will be the last slide. I know everyone is probably not very fond of PowerPoint presentations. I certainly am not, but I find that it at least gives us a way to introduce some things. So this is the last one, and that is the architecture. Like I said, certain audiences may not be familiar with Diagnostic Manager and how it's installed. I want to kind of give a sense of that aspect of the product before we dive into the 5 features that we were just looking at. Diagnostic Manager, first and foremost, is very simple to install. It's easy to download. It's easy to get up and running. It actually comes with a trial license already embedded with it, so you don't even have to interact with a person to get this product up and running. You go out to our website, download the trial. It's a fully functional trial for 14 days, up to 15 instances. It takes about 5 to 10 minutes to install, and one of the reasons for why it's so simple to install is that nothing gets deployed to your monitored instance. And I mean, there is no extra databases, extraneous store procedures, SQL agent jobs. There's no extra services that get created. And I have heard, like with other monitoring tools, they might claim that they're agentless, but then you go in and you find that there's a bunch of little objects here or there, or a SQL agent job that's created. That, in my opinion, is still putting something on that instance. It may be that unknown question mark about what's causing performance problems. So there's nothing with this product. It's basically the core architecture remotely through a lightweight polling process, pulling the data from the variety of dynamic management views that Microsoft affords us, sysperf info, exec sessions, and sys processes for the snapshot of the session data, extended events for query data, or trace API if you're dealing with older versions of SQL Server. Which is nice about this product is that it does still maintain support for older versions of SQL Server, where you'll find newer with other monitoring tools, they only support like the newer versions. They do not maintain that support. So again, I consider that to be a differentiator. So the collection service gathers that performance data. It's the worker bee responsible for gathering that data. It hands it off to the management service. The management service is what I call the doorway to the repository. And the repository is the backend database running on SQL 2005 or higher. I call the management service the doorway to the repository because it is responsible for putting data into the repository, and it's also responsible for retrieving that data to update the console. And you have different console mechanisms here, different ways of accessing this data. The .NET client is the primary way we access the data. And that is something that gets installed on your workstation, and you can have multiple installs of the .NET client on different user workstations. There's also the web interface, which provides a flexible way of securely, fully authenticated, being able to connect in from a browser to view many of the same types of performance data through the browser. It's not parallel functionality. I'll be clear on that up front. We're getting there, but it's not there yet. But again, it provides a flexible way of seeing such data as worst performing queries, current session activity, database status, heat map viewing, and overall enterprise summary status of how things are running. And then the last console is just notable to mention. It's completely optional, but it's the mobile interface. It comes with a product at no additional cost, but provides additional flexibility when you're on the road to be able to bring up on your mobile device, an iPhone, an Android device, a Windows mobile device, a tablet, a PC, but be able to bring it up on different devices, and it will resize the icons and indicators for whatever the device is. So you're not having to scroll all over the place. But when you're on the road, it's nice to be able to see what's going on and be able to manage your environment right there from a mobile device. When I'm at SQL Pass, I've had customers come up to me and pull up on their phone their environment, and it's always fun to see their environment, in a real production scenario, doing what it needs to do and working properly, and them being able to have access to that even though they're at the at SQL Pass. So just notable to mention, this product is licensed based on the number of instances that you decide to monitor, and again, not based on the number of users of the product. So if you want to give other team members access to the product, you can certainly do so. There is also onboard user tracking, which kind of speaks to regulatory compliance within the tool. We're hearing more about how auditors are turning their attention to the part that monitoring tools play in accountability to the organization. And for example, if someone changes a threshold in a way that you don't get an alert when a problem happened, and because of that, maybe there was a server outage, you're going to want to know who made that change. And we track within the monitoring tool what users are doing so that you can go back and review that activity to hold people accountable if you need to. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and jump into my console. Let me escape out of here and bring up the Diagnostic Manager. Okay, so from my bullet points previously, I started off with predictive and prescriptive analytics. So I want to touch on that. Hidden away in the services, you'll find that services that I just called upon as the primary data flow, the data being captured from the collection service, and then being handed off to the management service, and then that being written to the SQL Diagnostic Manager repository. But there are a couple of other services here. There's the REST service, you have the Predictive Analytics service, and those couple of services you may not notice when you start using the product, but they're valuable as far as being able to populate the web interface, from the REST service perspective, but also the Predictive Analytics is there doing its work on a regular basis to do things like calculate baselines and to determine what the predictions are around different alerts happening later today. That's the Predictive Analytics. And also it's responsible for kicking off on a scheduled basis the Prescriptive Analytics, which provides all of the recommendations. So this is the service that's going to give you that capability. And so what you're going to notice when you go into the console, let me just pick on one of my instances here. All right, so I'm selecting my instance IDERA Prod VM. And so a couple of things here. If I go to my active alerts, at the very top, I'm going to see different times later today. And these times are representative of past event trends. So for example, I see at 4:17 p.m. blocking session wait time is a 90% chance likely to happen. That's because I'm constantly doing presentations of this product, and it's very likely that at 4:18 p.m. the last couple of days, I've experienced some blocking activity in my environment that I've generated. In fact, right now in the background, I have a blocking condition using table locks that I've generated just for demo purposes. But above and beyond this one alert, if I click on the 90% chance likelihood of that blocking condition happening, I can bring up a detailed list of all the other alerts that tend to be noisy. So basically there's some heuristic analysis under the hood that's tracking that repetitiveness of these different alerts to present you the likelihood chance of these alerts happening. And of course, that can help you to be better prepared with a tool like Diagnostic Manager well in advance, ready to drill down and diagnose issues if and when they do happen. So that's the predictive analytics. We're going to look at the prescriptive analysis in just a moment. I just want to tie into that. If I go to my alert configuration, I have all of my different metrics here that are being monitored and alerted against. At the very top, for whatever alerts seem to be noisy, Diagnostic Manager will recognize that, and it'll throw up a little yellow flag here indicating that alert recommendations are available for this instance. So I recommend when you're in here, if you see that yellow flag, click on it, and it's going to show you which metrics could use some fine-tune adjustments. Or maybe they're just noisy based on you're having some bad performance on a regular basis. But if you see that there are some of these metrics that are looking like they're a little bit noisy or popping up continuous alerts, you might want to go in and make adjustments to the thresholds for these different metrics to quiet some of that noise. The predictive analytics also feeds into the baseline. This will give me a quick chance to plug that multi-baselining that I had removed for Temp Db, just because the predictive analytics does the calculations around this as well. What's nice about the multi-baseline capability is that it is allowing you to recognize certain events that happen on one instance versus the other instance and for certain time windows. Every SQL instance is unique in its own right, and the way I call it, they have their own personality, so to speak. So what makes good sense for baselining on one instance may be completely different on another instance. And so you can go in on a by instance basis and make different time windows where it calculates the baseline unique from other times of the day. So for example, I have my reporting services subscription activity Monday through Friday from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. This is a time window where I expect subscriptions are going to be kicking off, running more queries, and utilization is going to kick up a little bit. And just because that utilization goes up, I don't need to hear a bunch of alerts coming from the monitoring tool. Instead, I expect that the thresholds will dynamically adjust with that baseline, and I would only receive alert activity or alert notifications if the current performance at that time period jumps excessively outside what's considered normal for that time of the day. And so that, to me, that is something that is a benefit as well, and that ties in as part of that calculation with that predictive analytics service. And so the last part of what Predictive Analytics service is going to provide is the tie-in to Prescriptive Analytics. It's still part of the same service, even though we call it the Predictive Analysis service. So Prescriptive Analytics, on an instance-by-instance basis, you can go into the properties and configure the analysis configuration details for what categories you want it to analyze. You can schedule when it runs. By the way, you can set this as an alert action response as well. So when certain problems pop up, it runs an analysis for X number of minutes that you can configure here as well. When it's done, it presents you a nice report showing you everything that could potentially be wrong. And you can also run it manually. So to get to where the analysis details are, we go across the tabs at the top, or you can also expand the instance on the left-hand side and go down to the Analyze section at the bottom of the list. It's exactly the same navigation, just two different ways to do it. I prefer the tabs at the top myself. And so going to the Analyze section, we can see the recent report that was generated, and this is what it looks like. Now I'm going to be a little bit candid here. What this functionality is basically the integration of another product we offer called Sql Doctor. Sql Doctor was limited in a sense that it could run one analysis at a time. But it was a feature that we were constantly bringing up when we were talking about Diagnostic Manager. We're in these discussions with customers where, you know, when like what I said earlier, when we're talking about the evolution of monitoring, it came to a point where we had customers asking, you know, can you tell us about how to fix different issues that may exist that may be causing performance problems? When that discussion comes up, we would find ourselves pointing them to Sql Doctor, and it raised the question in our mind, why not just build that into Diagnostic Manager and make it part of the monitoring tool? And that's exactly what we did. That made good sense to us. It's built in. There's no modularity. You don't have to worry about installing other products or anything. It's built right into the product. And then, like I said, you can run it manually, schedule it to run, or have it fired off as an alert action response to run for a period of time and report on everything that could potentially be wrong. So here's my report. And some of these are just kind of FYI. I know I haven't run CheckDB in X number of days, and it's indicating that here on some of the top issues on the report. You can go down the list and you'll find other findings, like a large table with a lot of modifications since the last statistics were updated, missing indexes, duplicate indexes. Whatever you select in the list on the report, it's going to show you at the bottom when this is a problem, when it's not a problem, you know, different schools of thought, which again I consider to be a differentiator from other tools that either have no recommendations, they have no detailed findings, or if they do, they'll keep it limited to very basic, very generalized information. And then to go hand in hand with it, whatever the finding is at the top, you'll find these little buttons that light up. One of them is the optimization script, and I can click on that and it brings up the actual script that I can either copy out and run through Management Studio, or even better yet, hit the run button down in the lower right hand corner, and it's going to reach right out and perform that operation of dropping the index for me. And then some of these recommendations are even associated with query performance. And you'll see the finding label, finding text details for no join predicate has been detected. Search predicate contains a column expression in a function. Set row count command is being used instead of top command. A cursor could be optimized for better performance. And again, you'll find your recommendation or your findings at the bottom, the recommendation below that. If you have further questions about some of these recommendations, we have supplied learning links at the very bottom that you can click on. It'll take you out to third-party articles. Sometimes it's even our own experts in-house. It'll take you to those articles, but many of them are third-party articles. In this case, it's a Microsoft article discussing or explaining understanding SQL Server fast forward cursors. And again, at the top, we look at the light up buttons here to see what did light up, and we see show problem lights up, which I can highlight in that command exactly where I need to go to make the changes that are going to improve performance to eliminate this as a finding in the future. By the way, all of this can be exported out if you need to share this with other team members or maybe a third-party application developer, just to give them the right evidence of about what problems exist on their environment. So prescriptive and predictive analytics, that's the first thing I wanted to cover. The next part I want to touch on is the history browser feature. And to do so, I usually like to start back on the main part of the dashboard, because from this dashboard view, it's just kind of the introduction to what's happening across the enterprise. And with history browser data, I find a lot of times we start out with starting the high level, drilling down to problem, and then we might research that problem to see how did it happen, what happened leading up to this point before actually solving the problem. So when I start at this level, we can see on the left-hand side different types of organization of the instances. My views is organizing my 9 instances based on the criticality of the SQL instance. And by the way, I have 9 instances in my demo environment, but this is a very scalable solution, whether you're looking to monitor 150, 250, 350. I worked with Commerce Bank with the deployment of 390 instances. So, you know, this is a scalable solution that's going to grow with your environment over time. And then for the tags is something you can create unique to your environment, and it allows you to organize your instances logically based on location, region, perhaps department, a team member name, hosted applications, allocated resources. But it makes it simpler when you have a large environment to really quickly jump to where you need to be, again, without having to weed through 200 instances to find the 2 or 3 relevant to whatever the problem is being reported. So today I'm going to focus on payroll application, and we've had some reports of slowdowns. The payroll application has a red X on it, so I select the payroll application, which drills down a little bit further to show me the 2 instances that are feeding data to that application. Customer SQL is hosting a salary database, IDERA VM, perhaps a personnel record database, but they both come together to share data with that application. And I can see pretty quickly that customer SQL doesn't seem to be the problem here. However, this instance labeled IDERA VM, a quick mouse over shows me some fragmentation on some tables or indexes below the tables, session activity blocking for over 3,000 seconds, and there are some other aspects of performance for sessions, resource utilization type alerts, SQL services, SQL agent job status, long-running jobs or failures, and things like that. So I know this is where I need to pay my attention. So I go ahead and select that instance, and it drills down now to the dashboard view. We're going to look at this dashboard in just a little bit when we talk about the custom dashboard and the custom counter capability. But the dashboard is kind of what I consider the beginning, the start point of the diagnostic drill down process for that instance. It shows us illuminated on different charts where the bottlenecks reside across CPU, memory, network activity, disk performance, session activity, server waits, database activity. And so if anything looks like it's in yellow or red status, we can mouse over it real quickly, and it's going to show us what the problem is specifically. And so you can see here in this case that I have memory bottleneck, and I also have some blocking activity if I mouse over the session activity. So I'm going to focus on that blocking activity, and I select the blocking activity and drill down into it, and you can see response time and sessions and log statistics to go along with that. But then there's the block sessions that we can click on, and that drills into a dedicated view of all blocking and deadlocking that are affecting this environment right now. And there's the blocking chain, and the blocking chain is not unlike what you see in your own environment. I've created it, in my environment as kind of a fake set of blocking, but in your environment you might see a blocking chain very similar to this. In fact, it may grow to be worse than this, where you have multiple lead blockers and many processes being blocked. I've seen that in, for example, replication environments. And the obvious question is, what started this mess? I mean, I'm looking at the blocking chain here. I can even open up the report to see the details of the blocking, the lead blocker and block processes. And I can see here at the chart, down in the chart at the bottom of the screen, that this has been persistent for some time. But this is where we use the history browser feature and go back and research in this case. So I go up to the top, select the history browser button. It will bring up a calendar on the right-hand side showing today's date and previous snapshots gathered from earlier today. And we basically go down the list here to whatever point in time we're focusing on. Notice as I mouse over a point in time that it is showing me all, the top alerts that exist for that point in time. I'm going to go back to the beginning of our presentation because I started this blocking condition well in advance of the presentation. So there you see where it started to escalate, but we haven't gone back far enough. I'm going to use the back arrows here to take me all the way back in baby steps, all the way back to the very beginning, just like that. There you have it, session 72 blocking session 77. Here's the block details report showing me the lead blocker, the user, the database, the application, the last command, the last batch started, the last batch completed. By the way, when we're in history browser mode, the entire console is in history browser mode. Like I said, it's like a time machine. So if I want to go back to the dashboard and look at the performance data on the dashboard, I can do that. If I want to go to the resources tab and look at resource utilization statistics, I can do that. And jump around between different sections of performance data within the console. So there it is, session 72 blocks session 77. There's the block detail report. I might even export this out to share it with the application developers so that they'll have a copy of the evidence. They may come back to me now and ask me, if there was any other activity related to sessions that may have played a part in some way around this blocking condition. And they come to me and they ask, can you show me all sessions or show me evidence of all active session activity at 1:38 p.m., which you can see with the date and time stamp in the upper right-hand corner? My answer to that is yes, I can. I can select the lead blocker, right-click, and view session details, which will bring up at 1:38 p.m. the details of all of the active, sleeping, and suspended sessions. And you can do some advanced filtering to clear out some of this data, or go down the list and look at what was running at that point in time. In this case, there was not a lot going on. There's the blocking condition there. It took me right to the source of the problem. Notable to mention is under the blocking column is a true for blocking. Even if it did not do that, if I move off of that session, notice it highlights it in red to help draw your attention to that problem as well. So I might go ahead at this point, right click and export this to Excel, share this information with a payroll application developer, and now they have further evidence that sure enough, there wasn't other things going on that would have directly affected this with respect to other sessions. So at this point, we do need to solve the problem about the blocking condition. At this point, we've gotten to the root cause and shown evidence of blocking, and we use the history browser to do that. Just to show you though, I'm going to switch back to real-time mode where we still have that residual blocking condition. And if I take that lead blocker, I have options to view logs or show query history, which we'll talk about here in a moment. Trace the session to perform a minimally invasive trace of just that one session. Doesn't make a lot of sense here because it's sleeping, but if it were active, you'd see every little sequence of event taking place, and then you can close the window when you're done with it. And I'm going to go ahead and kill that session just to get rid of it. And if we go back to the blocking view, everything dropped off. But if we need to go back and research this again, we're coming into this a little bit late in the game. We always have that history browser button or back arrow to take us back to a time and a place where that was still a problem. and we can begin diagnosing it once again. So that kind of speaks to the history browser functionality. I kind of took a roundabout way of doing that because I wanted to really correlate history browser with a real problem and start at the high level and drill down into the problem and use history browser to research it. That's just one example, but you'll find history browsers valuable for all different aspects of performance, even if it comes down to something as simple as looking at page life expectancy at a point in time in the past. Now the next part is number 3 is Temp Db. Now with Temp Db monitoring, you'll find if we go to the configure alerts, there's a lot of different metrics that we provided in the product. Some of them are focused on version store monitoring generation, the version store generation and cleanup ratio. Some of them specific to Temp Db are version store size. Others are focused on contention. But another one is the session Temp Db space, which you probably want to know if a session is consuming, 20 or 30 gigabyte of Temp Db space. Other monitoring tools I find provide no visibility into Temp Db, or if they do, it's very limited, maybe monitoring around certain metrics or 1 or 2 metrics, but not really giving you any visualization on what people are doing within Temp Db. Whereas going along with some of the metrics that we're capturing for Temp Db, you can switch over to the database tab, which, as the tab name implies, is focused primarily on database specific metrics, availability groups, tables and indexes, backup and restore of the databases. All of this you can see on the ribbon bar at the top. But here's the Tempdb Summary. And the Tempdb Summary, you can go in and confirm that the Tempdb data file sizes are consistent with one another. Mine's off a little bit here. Monitor real-time the version store cleanup and generation ratio. The sessions that are directly interacting with Tempdb are at the bottom with the same type of management options that you saw in the session activity. Again, to look at locks, view session details, show the query history over time, trace the session, or even kill the session if you find one session is consuming a lot of space and seems to be problematic. And all of this, again, can be exported out to share with other audiences. And even up at the top with the different charts, if you see a chart reflecting some data that's a little bit suspicious or something you want to share with other audiences, you can select the Export to Excel option. And we've kind of, with these charts, we keep it kind of simple and two-dimensional, but if you want to get elaborate with it, feel free to pop open the little tool menu and rotate it around a little bit more three-dimensional, and do something a little bit like that if you want. And then you can export this out to plug into an email if you wanted to as well. That is Tempdb, and of course you can tie in alerting around any of those metrics. If a session's consuming 30 gigabyte of Tempdb space, then have it alert you, send you an email, or send the team an email to handle that, to let them know that this is something we need to take care of or get handled as quickly as possible. Now this brings me to number 4 on the list, custom counters and customization of dashboards. So starting off, we're going to go down to the administration section because this is where you're going to find custom counter capability. Again, I'll reemphasize this from earlier. This feature and the customized dashboard feature are areas of the product that I find are very fun to use because it lets me go in and get creative with this product. And do some things with the product that are above and beyond what are available in the product by default. So for example, I've gone in through the wizard. You have all these options. The wizard makes it so simple, by the way. There's really not much legwork from the perspective of whoever the administrator is of this product. It's as simple as select Windows counter, go to next, and it will enumerate all of the metrics for you. So you just pick from the list whatever it is you're wanting to monitor and plug it in and give it the right thresholds, and whether higher values are worse than lower values or lower values are worse than higher values, either way. Or you can go in and add a custom SQL script, which is one I like to do, and just plug in your script. There is a caveat though to adding a SQL script, and that is we must be able to take the results of that query and assign it thresholds. The warning and critical thresholds. And we didn't want to create a situation where we're pulling a bunch of data back from the results of the query and plugging that back into the Diagnostic Manager repository, bloating it with a bunch of, a million results from the query. So we kind of put that in as a restriction, but I can tell you that I have found I can do just about anything with this. If I'm looking to do a Boolean value type result, I will look at the results of whatever I'm monitoring, and it could be, you know, doing a select through a table, for example, and I'll output a 1 for yes or a 0 for no based on whatever results I'm looking at. I could do a select count star for criteria and output the results of that, perhaps. There are different ways to work with this product, and even, or with this feature of the product. And even if you need to have results put out somewhere, you can always, you know, of course, as part of your query, create a temp table and output the results there, and then at a later time, you can run your query against that. So with this part of the product, you can do such things as, well, I'll keep it simple here for one thing, do a select count star from sys databases, and then have it, you know, alert you if that increments, for example. Or maybe you want to look at it the reverse way. Someone deletes a database. So if the number goes down, then we trigger an alert and a notification for that. You can do it as simple as that, or you can get elaborate. Here's one that I created that is taking snapshots of the SQL Server configuration, saving it off to a temp table. Then it runs a snapshot in the future, and it will compare the previous snapshot with the most current, looking for any differences. And if there are differences, it'll do a select count star for the number of differences, outputting that numeric value to that, which again, you would get the alert then, and then it saves the details of what the change was out to a temp table that I can then query after the fact if I needed to. So like I said, you can really get creative with this product and do some fun things, especially around the custom counters. And once you create custom counters, and I'm going to walk through real quickly, I think it is good just to see how easy it is to create. Here I've added a script. I move to the next screen, and I have the option to use the collected value for each iteration, or the per second value since last collection if we're talking about an accumulative type value. We can customize scaling on the return values as well if we're dealing with decimals, for example. Then on the next screen, we have the friendly naming. I gave it a very generalized name of SQL configuration changes. It's grayed out because I've already given it a name, but usually when you get to this as the first creation, it's going to let you give it whatever custom name you want. Next, I tell it whether higher values are worse than lower values, or lower values are worse than higher values. In my case, higher values are worse than lower values. I want to know if the select count is incrementing by any number indicating that configuration changes were made. And I put a critical threshold of 1. I don't care about informational or warning. I only care about one change being made, and I want it to throw critical alerts for that. And it's as simple as that. Then you select finish. It'll ask you if you want to link it to an instance or many instances, and you can do that at that time, and then take advantage of those counters back on the dashboard if you want to. And that brings us to the dashboard. You'll notice I do have some custom counters added here. Here's my database count that I showed you with a select count star for sys databases, and there's the SQL configuration changes metric or script that I'm running. And to add custom counters, it's very simple. We go to the top to customize the dashboard. It will bring up these chart panels on the right-hand side that are already set up for you out of the box. So if you wanted to add CPU, disk, database-specific chart data, file activity, it's all available over here, and you can scroll through the list to find what you want on your own custom dashboard. I know they're kind of generically labeled, but if you have questions about what any of them do for you, click on it, that chart panel, and it will provide more descriptive information about that data, and also provide some visualization in the chart down at the bottom. And one of them is the custom counters. So if you wanted to, you could technically drag that custom counter on every one of these charts on the dashboard. By the way, you can also change the layout to include more columns or more rows depending on how much real estate you have on your monitor and how big you want to have that custom dashboard. So and then to go along with that, you can mix and match. You can put in some of your own custom counters, some of what we provide out of the box, and really customize your dashboard the way you like. And then longer term, if you want to hold on to that dashboard, you go up to the top, select the Save button. It will prompt you to give it a name for that dashboard. And then if you ever need to bring up that dashboard again, choose the Select a Dashboard option at the top, and you can basically swipe through the dashboards that you've created over time, find the one you want, select it to bring it to the forefront, customize it again if you want to at that point, or close the designer to see the live data updating on the screen. I killed the blocking, so that session view now, as you can see, it dropped off, and now it's back to gray instead of having red persistent. The last one that I want to wrap up our time with is query analysis, query monitoring. So I'm going to switch over here to the queries tab at the top. Query monitoring in this tool, I find it really provides a multifaceted way of analyzing query performance over time. Different ways, through signature mode, through statement mode, through query history, through query weights over time, or by duration. And then, of course, we have the addition of the workload analysis for execution plan analysis and overall statistical analysis. So just briefly going through what we're seeing here. The first thing I'm looking at is for whatever date range and time period I select here in the top part of the pane, it's reflecting in the charts and in the results at the bottom all of my worst performing queries. Now I pay attention down here at the bottom to the red and yellow, because red is highlighting those queries that fall into the top 5% highest impact for that query with respect to all the other queries and for that column. So if there's something red, that's pretty high impact with respect to other queries for that time period. Yellow indicates top 20% highest impact. And then I can gauge overall how high impact it was overall based on the number of occurrences as well. It's showing me for these top queries they executed, for example, this one executed 2 times in the given date range and time period. And off to the right, I see CPU, reads, writes, database, application. I don't see user and I don't see workstation, because what this is representative of is a consolidation of multiple executions of the same query and its overall performance across multiple executions. As a matter of fact, if I open up the query text to look at the entire command, I see the bulk of that command, but anything that was unique, like a parameter, because this represented 2 different executions, perhaps 2 different users, perhaps 2 different workstations, parameters are all represented by a number sign or a pound sign, whatever you want to call it. But it will give me a sense of what is going on in this query that may be causing performance problems that are causing it to be at the top of the list here with CPU reads and writes on average over all the other queries. So the other question that might come up when we look at that signature mode analysis is, you know, it's great that you're showing me the number of occurrences that for how many times that query executed. It's great that you're showing me the average CPU reads, writes, and duration for multiple executions of the query. But what if I want to see individually executed queries and individual users and individual workstations where that query came from and how that may have played a part in causing performance problems? Well, we can switch to the second way of analyzing queries, and that is statement mode. And so the same type of view is available here. It's showing us the color status down at the bottom for queries. It's also showing us in the chart the breakdown of performance, the duration CPU reads, writes based on SQL command, application, database. But now you'll notice user and client or workstation, because this took what we had in that previous view and broke it all apart into individual transactions. We're still noticing the same types of transaction. I identify that transaction by looking for this use master, and it has my little remarks here. And so that is still at the top of the list as one of the higher impact queries for that date range and time period. But now we can view the performance individually, who executed it, which workstation it came from. And if I open up the command text details, now I see the actual parameters that were passed to that query. Before we were looking at number signs. Now I'm able to see actual parameters. And notice it's the same command just with the parameters. Notice at the bottom there's a diagnose button. And I'm going to go ahead and click that button, because I may be asking myself, what can I really do here to improve the performance around this query? When I hit that little button, it jumps back over to prescriptive analysis that we were looking at earlier. But we're not running a full analysis on everything. We're focusing purely on that query. And so now it pops up these couple of items that could improve performance. So the first one, a search predicate contains a column expression in a function. Selecting show the problem will bring up that very command that we were just looking at with the details of the line where we need to go to rewrite the query, and even highlighting in blue where we need to go in that line to rewrite the query. And then there's a select star. That's obviously something that probably is going to throw red flags across the board. Select star is going to return a lot of data, maybe even data we don't require. And so that's what we see popping up here. Select show problem takes the same command that we drilled into and shows us the line where we need to consider going in and rewriting the query to focus explicitly on the columns we require, and we eliminate the asterisk or the wildcard. And with this, I might even export this out, especially if I'm dealing with a third-party vendor. I don't have the power to just go in and make changes, so maybe I need to share this information and I have that option available. That's the second way of query analysis built into the tool. There's 7 ways that I wanted to talk about here, and we'll just keep on moving through the list because I know we're pushing our time. The third way is showing query history over time. So you can bring up the query history, even go back in time if you want to for a longer period of time. This is going to show us, though, how that query has performed historically for CPU, duration, reads, writes. I might even pick a few days back here instead of just looking at today. And then we have the history of that query. If anything stands out or spikes up, we can highlight that one point. It shows us the date and the timestamp. We might even use History Browser again and go back and move everything back to that point in time and see what was going on across the board at that point in time. And you can change it from reads and writes to CPU to duration within the little drop down. So this is important to identify trends in activity and when performance spikes happen in utilization repetitively. It's also important because if we accept any of the recommendations from prescriptive analysis and we do any of the query tuning advice or make any adjustments to the configuration, we're going to want to know if that improves performance. This will show us where we came from, but we can put a mental marker on today's date and watch this query as we move into the future as well if we make changes. That's the third way of query analysis. The fourth and fifth are on this little tab called query weights. And we have the ability to look at query weights over time or query weights by duration. Both of these are associated to history browser data as well. Oops, I meant to go backward a little bit here to where we still had that blocking condition. A few clicks backwards here, and now I'm able to see my blocking activity over time historically, and that's what you see on the right-hand side, the lock MIS category. And we can also view the lock activity by statement or application or database. This is going to be helpful when you're looking at historical wait activity, just to identify if anything's spiking up, if anything looks abnormal for a point in time. It's also great, though, to use this feature if you're more in the heat of the battle trying to figure out what's going on right here, right now in my environment. I can hit the drop down and select the query weights by duration, and maybe start off with the application because maybe someone's calling me up reporting slowdowns in whatever application, maybe that payroll application. So then we find the application here on the left-hand side, select the application we want to focus on. I'm not going to pick on Management Studio, that's that blocking condition, but click on the application and now it drills down to specifically wait activity for just that application and nothing else. We're not muddying the water with anything else happening on any other applications. And if anything stands out with these weight categories, click on the weight category and it drills down now to the statements related to that weight category, related to that application and nothing else. Now granted, the statements are cut off here. They're truncated, but that's for cosmetic purposes. If you want to see it, right click view text and it pops open the entire command and even provides an option to copy that out. And you can drill down further, down to the database for that particular statement, for that particular weight type, for that particular application. We're not muddying the water with anything else. We're drilling down very deep into what is happening that's causing the problems around with respect to weight types and wait times with respect to that particular application. And it goes without saying you can drill down from any tab at any time and get to the database sessions and users. So far, that's 5 different ways of query analysis. And I'm going to wrap up with the last couple here, and that is going to be taking us over here to the web interface, which the web interface in itself is a benefit of the product, but I'm going to focus on workload analysis because that's where we're going to get the statistical analysis. This is a separate little add-on that makes Diagnostic Manager the Pro version. So selecting that workload analysis in the dropdown will take us over to a separate view through the browser. It is a browser-based interface. I'm going to go to the top and select to view the last 4 weeks of collected data. So I get this nice little view of my environment showing the top SQL statements over the last 4 weeks, the top logins, top machines, top programs, top databases, and it's the top based on wait activity. And we're also analyzing executions, number of executions. One category is wait types, and if something draws your attention, we know from my environment that I'm running blocking on a regular basis, so there's a lot of wait type of lock activity happening there. But right there at number 2 is using CPU, and I might want to know, why do we have so much CPU time consumed? Clicking on that category will drill down a step further to display wait types specific to CPU activity. We're not muddying the water with other wait types. We're focusing on CPU specific activity, so it makes sense. We're going to look at SOS scheduler yield, thread pool, signal wait time, for example. Also to the right, we see SQL Server CPU versus non-SQL Server CPU, day to day, week to week, because we're still looking at the last 4 weeks of data. Compilations versus recompilations, top statements overall using CPU, OS wait times, number of executions over the last 4 weeks. What's nice here is the drill down capability. If something stands out, like I have this little spike here, and I want to know what in the world was going on here, and what time representation is that, looking at the timeline. Well, mouse over shows me that this represents one entire day. Well, I need a little bit more than that. I want to see a little bit more detail. So I'm going to mouse over that little spike and let off the spike to drill into it. And now I've zoomed in for a smaller subset of time. And each one of these spikes even represents a smaller amount of time. And we can highlight another spike and drill into that as well if we want to. But on the left-hand side, you can also see top waits for that little sliver of time I highlighted, top statements that executed for that sliver of time, top programs. And if something draws my attention from the list with the top statements, let's say, I'm going to click on one of these statements, and now it will drill down into the statement to show me if there are any problems, missing indexes. And in this case, it actually found the potential gain and cost of, because we're missing an index, if we added an index, is 96.36%. You can view the recommendation. It shows you where you need to add the index, the command that you can copy out to actually create the index. There's also a heavy operator detected, and it looks like what it is a clustered index scan. So we have the clustered index object, and just to view the execution plan, we can expand the examine operator right above the execution plan. It will expand out the execution plan here as well, showing every step of the operation, CPU cost, IO cost, and at the bottom, of course, is that clustered index scan. And then to correlate with that clustered index being a heavy hitter, we can look to the right, and there's the top accessed objects, and there's that clustered index, the number 1 object for just that sliver of time that I drilled into. At which point I might want to look at that a little bit closer. I see that only 1 login and 1 machine are associated with that activity. So clicking on that top accessed object drills down to show me that particular object and the results of the statistics of the index, the clustered index. Were there clustered index seeks, clustered index scans, full table scans? What were the top statements for just that sliver of time that accessed that object? Other queries that have accessed that object over time that were missing indexes or suffering in performance, including the one we drilled into, which it has a little check mark by, because that fell into the sliver of time that we highlighted. So this is the 7th way of query analysis. Like I said, there's many ways, but I bundle them all together under the umbrella of query analysis, and I kind of consider that to be a differentiator of this product versus other tools that are out there. So those were the 5 ways or 5 areas of the product where I think we really stand out, including predictive and prescriptive analysis, history browser, being able to go back in time and analyze problems of the past and replay activity, Temp Db monitoring of users interacting with Temp Db, and contention and version store generation and cleanup ratio, sessions consuming excessive Temp Db space, custom counters in the dashboards, query analysis, the 7 ways of query analysis. Just consider this product has been around for over 15 years, and there's so much that we didn't get to cover today, including fragmentation analysis. We did cover the multi-baselining a little bit there. That's another feature of availability group monitoring, which also we have replication and mirror status monitoring, activity tracking, heat mapping, reporting, all kinds of different benefits of this product that we could go over more one-on-one. But we're up on our time now, and so I want to kind of minimize this and see if there are any questions to cover at this point. So I'm going to expand out the questions on the right-hand side, and let's see if we have anything here. And I don't see anything standing out here. So I guess that's a good thing. You kind of go into these things, especially if I'm showing you the top 5 features, of not necessarily knowing what you're going to see exactly. If any questions do come up after this, we're always here to answer those questions. We can get on another presentation where we dedicate one-on-one time to you and your organization to do a full-scale presentation of any of the IDERA products, especially Diagnostic Manager. And you know, if this is kind of what your taste, if you're new to Diagnostic Manager, you haven't really installed it at this point, but you want to install it, like I said earlier, you can always go out to our website and download a fully functional trial evaluation of the product. It installs in about 5 to 10 minutes, and you'll have 14 days and up to 15 instances that you can monitor. If you need more time or more instances, we're more than willing to help out with that. Okay, I just got a question. How can you see execution plan? And that was what I just covered in the workload analysis. If we go into, real quickly, I'm going to bring that up again. We had taken a step further than the workload analysis. So let me drill into it here. Again, I had chosen 4 weeks of data. You can select whatever time period you want, but drill into CPU utilization. Select a query from the side here for whatever time period you select, or drill into a shorter time period that you need to focus on. Click on a statement, expand the execution plan in the middle of the screen, and you'll be able to see all of the steps of the operation and the cost associated with the different steps. That's how we can view the execution plan. Another question was, what is the impact to enable query monitor? Now, that's a great question. We have gone into this product. We've added features within the query monitoring to, basically you can configure query monitoring to capture specific types of queries. In my case, I'm capturing all queries greater than 1,000 milliseconds. What we're doing here is flagging queries that exceed certain thresholds so that we're able to minimize the impact as much as possible. There's obviously no free lunch when we're talking about processing of queries. If you decide to collect all queries, then consider that whether it's extended events or whether it's trace, that there's going to be the process of SQL Server writing that activity out to some files or being processed through the services to put in the repository. So we try to cut back on anything that would be unnecessary as much as possible by defining thresholds. And also you can do some advanced filter options based on databases, applications, or even SQL text. And so you have those options available, and that will help narrow down the impact. Usually the impact is less than 1 to 3% on average, but it really comes down to how many queries you're processing and what you've defined for your thresholds for what you need to capture in your environment, but typically 1 to 3% impact. In the 10.2 release, by the way, we did make adjustments to the services where we were offloading the processing of actual statement activity and extended events onto the services, whereas before, kind of from our agentless approach, we were going through Temp Db ourselves to capture that data. Now we've offloaded that as a separate process through .NET, basically processing extended events separately. And let's see, the next one is I have DM on my web, and DM and my web looks different. How did you get to the queries? Okay, so what we looked at today, remember this is focused on the top 5 features of the product. We can also set up another time where we do a full-scale demo of all the different features and functionality. But when we were looking at the web, I was focusing purely on workload analysis. That is a separate add-on that makes up Diagnostic Manager Pro, but you can also go into the regular web interface, which is probably what you're referring to, and that is by selecting SQL Diagnostic Manager from the drop-down. That will take us into this view, which is what you're probably familiar with. And this is where you're able to see the instances. You can go in and view a heat map, which provides a gradient color change from one instance to the next. Click on an instance if you want to drill into the details. And I'm sorry, I probably should expand this out a little bit more. I had it in a little window there. And drill into it to view kind of a tabular layout of different performance data, including sessions, queries, query weights, resources, database status, and alert activity. This is the main web interface. What we were looking at a second ago, as far as your question goes, how did you get to the queries? What I did is I hit the drop down and chose the workload analysis, and that's what took me over to the other analysis screen for the query performance. And the other question was, is it possible to send block session info in the alert? That question, so to that point, what you can send is blocking session details. The way to determine what you can send in an alert, what the alert summary text details are going to look like, what we can do is go over here and we're going to select that specific alert. Just a filter on that, and I went too far. And we'll go over a time period. Okay, so these are some of the times where I've had blocking activity. Whatever I pick from the list here, down at the bottom, I see the details of the database, the server related to the problem, the summary, alert summary text details, and the actual alert message. So this is the blocking activity, the blocking session activity, the command that's executing. This can be embedded in your alert. So when you go to the top, to the tools menu and alert actions and responses, when you are setting up an alert response and you configure an email, for example, that information will be part of the alert text from the drop down. I already have the alert text details here. So that's the kind of information that you would see in your email message body, what you see here. So that is the last question on the list. And so again, if you require some one-on-one time with us, we can set up that time and do a demonstration or talk about any of these features a little bit more in depth. And again, all of the IDERA products are available on our website, fully functional for 14 days with the trial. So you can certainly go out, download them, and give them a whirl in your environment. Other than that, we've recorded this presentation. It will be accessible after this presentation is finished on the web, so you can go back and review what we've covered today as well. With that, that's going to end our presentation for today. I appreciate you attending and look forward to talking to you next time. Thank you.